Well, on to better things.
Yes.
On to better things. Since we're being so upfront and honest about things, we should talk about speaking the truth.
There you go.
Seems like a
There you go.
reasonable topic. So
You're not setting me up here for some disclosure, right?
not unless
you're going to tell the truth now, right?
only if you have something to disclose.
Yeah, it's
up to you. Yeah, it's up to you. I'll leave that to you. It's between you and the Spirit. No, surprisingly, I was looking back at some of our old videos, and we've done an episode on that verse in Ephesians 4, speak the truth in love, but it was not generally what it's about. This is attempt number 2. No, we did it as a setup to a special series that we did. It was a special equipping hour on speaking the truth in love. Right. So it was mostly your appeal as a pastor to our people why it would be worth their time to go to that.
Sure.
So I thought it'd be worth taking a couple of videos and breaking down that verse a little more. So let me read the context of Ephesians 4, or at least the verses that are pertinent in that chapter, and then I'll give you kind of a few questions to set you up, and you can take it away. So in Ephesians 4, Paul's talking about the unity in the body of Christ. So he's giving instruction to the church about how we're meant to live as one body. And down in verse 15, he says, so first of all, he says that we're to grow together into mature manhood. We're to be unified. We're to not be tossed around by every wind and wave of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. And then in verse 15, he says, rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ. So he gives this command to the church that we should be speaking the truth in love to one another. Later on in chapter 4, he makes a similar statement down in verse 25. It says, therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you, so now if it wasn't clear before that this is something that we're all supposed to do, he says, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. And I think that phrase, for we are members one of another, is the implication that we're to be doing this out of love, because we're part of one body, because we're united. Right. So I thought we would take this video and next week as well to let you flesh that out a little bit for us. Obviously, what does it mean to speak the truth, but maybe even getting into why it's so important to speak the truth, and then help us think through it contextually. Do we always have to speak the truth? What does that mean? Does that mean I have to share everything that I think of because I think it's truthful? Mm-hmm. If my wife buys a new shirt and comes to me and says, "Do you like this shirt?" and I'm not crazy about it, do I have to tell her I hate it? Or, what does that look like? What does it look like to speak the truth in love? Why is it so important? Help us think through that practically. How do we do that in our day-to-day lives? So those are all my questions.
Sure. Well, I think, to the first one, why is it so important? Essentially the answer to that is God is a God of truth, and he hates lies. It's an abomination to him. So lying is as antithetical to God as you can be. And so honesty is the characteristic of God, and therefore godliness. In Titus chapter 1 and verse 2, the scripture says, in the hope of eternal life, which God, who cannot lie, promised long ages ago, that God cannot lie. There is this awareness that God is a God of truth. In Hebrews chapter 6, verse 18, if you want to read that one.
Hebrews 6:18, so that by two unchangeable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us.
And then if you go to James 1:17, we hear the same.
James 1:17, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change.
So the idea there is the shifting narratives. God does not, he is absolute light.
Consistent.
There's no shadow. There's nothing. He's consistent. Yeah. So he doesn't lie. It's impossible for him to lie.
Right.
And therefore, deceit is something that is condemnable based on the nature of God. And so one of the foremost reasons we tell the truth is because God is a God of truth. And in fact, that's what Jesus says, right, in John chapter 14 and verse 6, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. It is so much, so integral to who God is that Jesus says, I am the truth. And so to lie is to violate the very nature of Christ, who is the truth. And so it's not a minor thing. Lying, deceit, duplicity, those kinds of things, shifting, telling one thing to one person, another thing to other person, shading the truth, those kind of things. That, with the intention of deceiving, which is the issue.
Right.
And we'll develop that more in just a moment. But I think it's important because, first of all, God is a God of truth. The other thing is that, as you said in that Ephesians 4, we're members one of another. We're united in Christ. We're one. And so there is that sense of you're fracturing the body and the unity of the body when you mislead someone deliberately so that you're thinking one thing and you're knowing one thing, and they're thinking they know another thing that is not consistent. That's division within the body. So unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace mandates that we be honest and that we don't lead someone to believe something that's not true, because we are members one of another. Another thing I think that makes it so heinous is that it disassociates you from God, who is truth, and deliberately aligns yourself with Satan, who is identified as the father of lies.
Yeah.
In John 8, it says that explicitly in John 8, 44, where Jesus describes Satan that way.
Yeah, he's. I think he's speaking to the Pharisees, and he says, "You are of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies."
And then verse 45 as well.
But because I tell the truth, you do not believe me.
So Jesus says, I am a truth teller.
Yeah.
Satan is a liar. So who do you want to align with?
Yeah.
Do you want to align with Jesus, who is the truth, or do you want to align with Satan, who is a liar and the father of lies and a liar from the beginning? Obviously, the believer would never want to align with Satan. We would want to be conformed to the image of Christ, that toward which we've been predestined. So that's, being truthful is important because of those things. We are members one of another. God is a God of truth. Jesus is the truth. Satan is the father of lies. We don't want to align ourselves with him. Those are some general reasons why it's so important to tell the truth. Now, how much truth do you have to tell?
Right.
If a dress, let's even be more blatant, right? If a dress makes your wife look fat, she's not fat, but a dress makes her look fat. It's like a sack or something that she puts on. And she goes, I just love these colors. Do you like this dress? The colors are lovely. Truth. But, and then if the presses, right, and says, well, does this dress make me look fat? Another truthful statement, if I wore that dress, I would look fat. Truthful statement, right?
I see. What I want to know is this all going to be repeated in the marriage class that you're teaching coming up? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. No, I think that there needs to be a care taken. I mean, I remember one time, and I may have shared this in another Living by the Book episode, I don't remember, but I was going into Guyana way back in the 90s, where it was communist controlled, and the missionary down there says, now when you enter the country, don't tell them that you're going to be teaching the Bible.
Sure.
And because they'll refuse you, turn you around. And I'm going, oh my goodness. All right. So I got up to passport control, and they look at me and they say, what's the purpose of your visit? I said, education. And they said, are you going to school or teaching? I said, I'm teaching. What are you teaching? I said, I'm teaching ancient history. It's a true statement.
Yeah, sure.
What kind of ancient history? Middle Near Eastern. Well, what countries? I said countries such as Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Israel, Egypt, that area.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything specific about what you're teaching? I said, well, I'm teaching some of their traditions and some of their laws that they live by. And so the traditions by which they live by and the ethics that they live by, and the impact of those things on the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Stamped me and off I went, right?
Nicely done.
Well, I didn't lie, but I didn't tell them
Right.
what would have caused the inability to
Teach the Bible.
proceed,
Yeah.
right? So I was careful. I did not lie once, but I did not fully disclose either because there was prudence in what I was doing. Now, there are some who would see that's a situational ethic kind of a thing, and you should have just said, trusted God and said, I'm teaching the Bible.
Right. Well, that's the old, if the Nazis came to your front door
Yeah.
and asked, are you hiding Jews under your floorboards?
Yeah.
What should you,
Yeah.
how should you respond?
Yeah, I would say I'd find some,
Right.
they're slats, not floorboards, they're slats. It's
Right.
decking. But no, I don't. But you know, there is prudence, and you're charged to be prudent.
Right.
In John 16, look at verse 12.
I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now.
So Jesus had a lot more to say,
Yeah.
but he didn't say it all. There was more truth, but he didn't disclose it because he said, you're not able to bear it. You can't handle the truth, right?
Yeah.
That was the mercy of the Lord in saying, I have things I could say and I desire to say, but I'm not saying it because you're not ready to hear it.
Yeah.
You're not ready to hear it.
Yeah. You can't handle the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. And I think that we have to be careful that we don't feel the need to disregard the capacity of someone to hear something just so that we can acquit our conscience by saying, I've told you the truth.
Interesting.
Even though it leaves them in a heap, in devastation, in a disconsolate state of being. That's not Christ-like.
Right.
Jesus demonstrated that. In Proverbs 10, there is that passage, that verse that gives a principle, as the Proverbs do. Not a law, but a principle.
Yeah.
In Proverbs 10, verse 19.
When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent.
So restraining what you say. You don't just say everything that's in your mind.
Yeah.
I've been around people that just, if it's on their mind, it's out.
Right.
And, you know, my wife sometimes, to her chagrin, feels that that's true of me, that if I think it, it comes out, right? And the mouth speaks faster than the mind can process. And, you know, that's a fool that does that. So you measure what you say, and you say things that are warranted, truthful always, never lying by what you say, but also considering the impact
Right.
of what you're saying
Yeah.
to make sure that it is giving grace.
Yeah.
It is not
It's building up, not breaking
destroying.
down.
Right, exactly. And that really is where, you know, look back at that Ephesians 4 passage, in that same context we started, it kind of comes to a culmination in verse 29. Go ahead and read verse 29.
Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear.
Okay, so that's the spirit with which we tell the truth.
Yeah.
We don't just say, here you go, boom, and we lower the boom on somebody by telling them the truth.
We have to consider the impact of our words on the person.
Right.
So it's not just our job to say truth and, you know, let the consequences be what they are.
Right.
We have to consider how will this affect and impact the person I'm speaking to.
Exactly. if somebody comes through that smells, and they hug me and they smell like body odor and their breath is bad and their clothes smell, and I don't have the responsibility to tell them you stink.
Yeah.
I don't. That would not edify them. Now, I may at some point, if the opportunity arises,
encourage them to
as a
try some
shepherd,
deodorant. Yeah.
as a shepherd,
Right.
hey, what's going on in your life?
Yeah.
Are you doing okay?
Yeah.
What's happening? Have
Yeah.
you been struggling? Because perhaps that's all an indication that the person
Right.
isn't of a mindset to really try to take care of themselves.
Interesting.
And so you might want to follow up on it, but you don't say, "Oh my, boy, you stink." I'm just being truthful. That's not loving. That doesn't care for someone. And so you don't have the obligation to say everything you observe. And even though it would be true that their aroma is unpleasant, you don't have to tell them that. Now, again, it could be very merciful to communicate to them that there is something that is not quite right. I mean, my wife and I have this pact that if either of us knows the other has bad breath, that we communicate, "Hey, you got bad breath."
Yeah.
Because we're so close to people all the time, that we don't want people being repelled by, "Don't get close to Gregory, man. It's you take your life in your hands." We don't want that. So she'll tell me, I'll tell her.
Chemical warfare.
Yeah. If we're aware of that.
Yeah.
And we don't usually have to do that because generally our oral hygiene is
up to par.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but we say, hey, if it is, we need to be careful about it. And then, and that takes you back to Proverbs again, chapter 15, Proverbs 15, and look at verse 28 of Proverbs 15.
Verse 28, the heart of the righteous ponders how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out evil things.
So think about what you're saying.
Yeah.
Think about how what you say impacts the other person. Think about whether or not they're going to be edified. Think about whether they need to hear the truth, whether they even deserve to hear the full disclosure of the truth. Like those people in the passport control. They didn't need for me to disclose everything to them. I answered every one of their questions specifically.
Yeah. And truthfully.
And if they did not ask the right question.
Right. It's not your job.
Yeah. So I feel that, and that's happened in Soviet Union once back in the mid 90s when I was traveling between Ukraine and Belarus. And I really got fleeced. I had to give a $100 bribe to get back into Ukraine at that time, but I was being peppered with questions, and I didn't want to imperil my ability to get back into Ukraine because I had a multi-entry visa, and they gave me the story that yesterday the policy changed and these multi-entry visas are no longer any good. And I'm going, oh my goodness, I'm getting fleeced here.
Yeah,
I know it.
Sure.
But then they were peppering me with all these questions about why are you here? Who are you with? And so I was answering every one of them accurately, truthfully, but not with full disclosure. I answered what they asked, and I left it to them to ask the right questions if they wanted more.
Yeah.
And they finally got their $100 and off I went.
Yeah.
But
Did you do it with like the real subtle handshake where you fold the dollar bill in your hand and
no.
I
said,
wasn't that
what is the fee that you charge?
Okay. You're just pretty upfront
for
about it.
a 1 day or one-time entry visa.
Yeah.
$100.
Yeah.
Okay, here you go. Okay. Then I went off.
Wow.
So I had to ask the question.
Yeah.
And again, that question is it's not promoting graft.
Right.
I didn't say, what can I do to grease your palm?
Right.
I just said, what is the fee for a one-time entry into Ukraine? Can I pay it? And they said, yes, you can pay it, $100. I said, okay, here you go.
Yeah.
And they stamped me and off I went.
Yeah.
Knowing full well that the multi-entry visa was still good.
Right.
But who are you to tell them?
Well, that's not your jurisdiction.
Yeah,
it's not
I
your job.
I can't do that.
Yeah, it's not your job.
Just because they lied to me
like,
doesn't justify my
Right.
lying back to them or whatever.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
okay, well,
Right.
I have to deal with it.
Hmm.
And, speaking the truth did not mean that I have to say, you guys are lying. I know that's true. I mean, you guys are lying to me. I'm just being fleeced.
That might have extended your stay.
Yeah.
A little longer than you wanted.
Even though if I'm a legalistic truth teller
Yeah.
and I know what they're doing
Right.
and that's true, I don't have to tell them
Yeah.
the truth
Yeah.
as I see it. I can just say, okay,
Yeah.
the prudent man or the heart of the righteous ponders how to answer, and a soft answer turns away wrath.
Yeah.
But grievous words stir up strife. So I wasn't interested in that.
And it's, it seems like what you're saying is we don't have to say everything, but you'd probably also say we have to be careful to not avoid saying the truth because we're trying to avoid necessary conflict,
Right.
because we're trying to avoid the necessary consequences of the
Right.
truth.
No.
I think we also have to be careful not to take this and use that as an excuse to justify being less than truthful.
No,
because
of
we all
course
have those moments where we're like, man, I know that I should probably, I know I need to say what's true, but I also I'm not looking forward to the consequences of what happens when I do.
Right, right. And I think some of that is focus. In other words, is it focused on the mission that you're there to perform for the glory of Christ? Is that the thing that you're trying to protect? Or is it you're trying to protect yourself? Like if I ask an 8-year-old kid, did you break the window? And they say, oh man, if I tell the truth here, then it's going to cost me something. So
Right.
I can't tell the truth.
Right.
Well, you're trying to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a completely different thing
Right.
than trying to protect the mission
Right.
and so on.
Right.
And if they say, if the child tries to say, okay, I'm going to make my father ask the right question, and you have this brilliant 8-year-old
Right.
who's saying a ball did go through that window.
Right.
I saw it.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know who did it? That's a situation.
What do you mean by no?
Yeah. Yeah. It all depends on what the definition of is.
Can we really know anything?
Yeah, Clintonianism. But anyway. But
No,
again, you love the truth because it's who God is.
Yeah.
You hate lying because that's who Satan is.
Yeah.
So, somebody might say, well, you misled the Border Patrol people, the passport control people. And I said, I answered all of their questions exactly as they asked them.
Right.
How can I assume what else they're going to ask if they don't ask it? So I'm just going to let them do their jobs, and I'm going to answer them specifically.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But lying to protect your own self, I think that's a completely different thing.
Yeah. That's helpful. Helpful distinction. Thank you.